Thank you for checking out Tea and a Buddy on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hello, and welcome back to Tea and a Buddy podcast. I'm Erica.
And I'm Dominic.
And on this episode, we are going to be discussing one of our favorite British television shows, and it is called Poldark.
Poldark.
And it's airing right now in Britain, or I don't know if it'll still be airing by the time this podcast goes out, but we're
Series 5 is the final season is airing in Britain.
Yes.
Every Sunday night at 9, or I think it's 9.
Yes.
On BBC One.
And we're not going to be discussing this season because it hasn't aired in America. So we're just going to kind of...
We are keeping up with it, though, so...
Yeah, we
do know what's going on.
We're just going to talk about the show in itself and the characters and basically the plot and the actors and all of that great stuff. And so if you're not watching it, maybe after you listen to this podcast, you will want to start watching it.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows, indeed.
So what is Poldark about, Dominic?
He's a captain in the British Army. Well, he was. And he returned... The stories were written by Winston Graham, who wrote Marnie and other things, but
They were novels.
They were novels, yeah.
Yeah.
They were novels, and he wrote them in the 40s and the 50s, I think. I think it was something around that time anyway, and he set them in the late 18th century, so around 1780s.
Well, it starts like just at the end of the American Revolution.
Yeah, because in the late 18th century, he returns to Cornwall in England from the American War of Independence, where he's been fighting against the rebels, as they were known then.
Yeah.
And he returned home, and he spent 3 years in the army. He battled in Virginia and on the battlefields of Virginia and all that kind of stuff. And
he was wounded.
He was wounded, and he had a scar and whatever. And he returned home to his childhood home of Nampara in Cornwall, and he discovers his father's died.
Yeah, we don't really know exactly how long he's been gone, but I'm assuming
It's about three.
for a
It's
while,
about
right?
three years, which was a long time back then. It was like a long, considering it was a very long.
It was far away.
Far away, you had to use it was the age of sail still, you know.
Yeah.
And
I wonder how long it would have taken to get to America at that time.
I'd say a good 6 or 7 months.
Really?
Depending on the winds and everything, yeah. I mean, maybe it's longer than that. Somebody who has sailed. That
seems long to me.
Who has sailed in a wooden ship with sails will know, yeah. He comes home to Cornwall in England, discovers his father's died, his estate of Nampara is in ruins, and he's in considerable debt. And his childhood sweetheart, who he thought would wait for him, is going to marry his cousin Francis.
Well, they all hadn't heard from him.
And, they all hadn't heard from him for a while, so they all assumed him dead. They all assumed, he's gone off to war in America, and they've killed him, and that's the last time we'll ever see him, But he turns up and surprises everybody at this dinner, and and the series, the original series starred Robin Ellis as Poldark, and that was in the 70s, so that was, and it closely followed the books and everything. But this series is it's been revived, and Aidan Turner is Poldark.
Let me just talk to you ladies about Aidan Turner, and you men, perhaps, listening. If you do not know who Aidan Turner is, well, first of all, I didn't know his name.
She had no idea who he was.
Well, I did, because I'd seen The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And he's in The Hobbit.
He's in The Hobbit.
Yeah, so if you've seen The Hobbit, you know him. You just might not know his name. And if you don't know his name, you should look him up, because he is absolutely probably the most beautiful man alive right now. He is so gorgeous, and he's just makes the whole show worth watching, in my opinion. It's a good show, but he is very, very beautiful. And he is in The Hobbit, and I don't know what else he's been in. We've seen him in a couple things since he started Poldark. We saw him in
Agatha Christie.
an Agatha Christie adaptation.
And then there were none, I think that was.
Anyway,
back to Poldark. Yeah, Aidan Turner's in it. All the women love him.
He's gorgeous. Watch the show to look at him. I've discovered over the last several years that I am a big fan of like historical dramas, historical fiction. So yeah, anytime Dominic sees a new show or something like that that's like set in any period that is not
drama,
that's not even today, yeah, a period drama, we pretty much know I'm gonna like it because I'm just, I don't know, weird like that or cool like that, depending on who you are.
Cool like that, I think. But yes, the plot of Poldark is at the start of the series. He's come home, his estate is in ruins, and everything's just basically the home changed. Nothing he really wants to come home to. Yeah. So when he's into
should have stayed in America.
Should have stayed in America, yeah. Then with his kind of life, he has to rebuild his life literally, and he goes into town and he meets a young woman.
How come he has no money though? Why does he?
Well, when Joshua died, Joshua was a bit of a cavalier guy. That's his father. He died, he had no money, and, he left, he was in debt to, like, the Warleggins or someone, or he was in debt to Pasco, maybe. Okay. So he had no money there, and, of course, Judd and Prue,
which are
his servants, were absolutely useless. They didn't do any really work, anything. They just drank and, didn't keep up the house. And he'd been gone for a good few months.
So the Poldarks are like, what would you call them? A noble family?
They're like a noble, yeah, they were like
part of the aristocracy.
Aristocracy, yes, so
got
it's
a
like
family home.
Trenwith, I think, is the family home, yeah. So they've got Aunt Agatha, Charles Poldark, who was the head of the family, and his cousin Francis. And so he was Uncle Charles, and his brother was Joshua. And so when Ross comes home, he's basically, everybody's like, oh, Ross is home, and Elizabeth's engaged to Francis now, and, we all thought you were dead, so bad luck.
Yeah.
So he goes into town, he's in a black mood because he's like, I've got to throw myself into, like, regaining, because they had all their money from the mining industry in Cornwall, which was like tin and copper.
Right.
And so he goes in to town to, like, wind up his assets or whatever, and see what he's doing. And there he meets a young girl called Demelza, and he saves her, I think, from, like, being beaten up by people.
Her father, I think.
I don't know if it was her father or if it was someone, street urchins or whatever, just,
She's a really scroungy little,
scroungy little mousy girl, and she looks ratty, and she's got a little dog Garrick and everything. So he saves her and he takes her home and he employs her as a kitchen maid. And she instantly excels herself in that position because she's much far better than Judd and Prue, And so eventually, as the story goes, they fall in love,
Well, I mean. She is, Demelza, by the way, is played by Eleanor Tomlinson. In this series, she has this dark red hair, and it's
Haida Reed plays Elizabeth. Warren Clark was Charles Poldark. He died, Charles died in some of the series, so it's like...
Spoilers.
It was pretty much spoiling the whole thing for the show anyway, because it's series 1.
Well, I don't think we're going to tell them every single thing that happens throughout the show.
We're going to go through the whole thing. We're going to go straight through to Dwight Ennis and what happens to Judd.
Yeah, so by the way, if you haven't watched it and you're planning on it, we might be spoiling it a bit. So you might not want to listen, or maybe you don't care. I don't know. Anywho.
Anyway, I think the standout in this series, though, is, I think, George Warleggin. I think he's really like a good.
He's the best character.
He's the best character. I mean, you know, if you've read the books and you've seen the other series, you know what George Warlegan is like. I think Jack Farthing plays him really well.
They're bankers.
He's a bank. He was
moneylenders?
Moneylenders. Yeah, him and his uncle Carey. Were just like, ooh, you know, like them Scrooges, basically.
Yeah,
you know.
So tell them the story of George Warlegan, like basically how he came to be.
I mean, he went to school with Ross, and so Ross and Francis and whoever else, because they all went to the same school, and he was kind of like looked down upon, and he was made fun of because he was a lowly blacksmith's son or grandson or something. You know, he didn't come from nobility, he didn't come from money,
Right.
So he was that typical boy who was kind of bullied, I guess, by Ross and everyone because they were all nobility and they were all popular and they were all wonderful and everything, you know. So he resolved himself to like make himself the most influential man in England, you know, in Cornwall at least, and get into high society and rub shoulders with the aristocracy and everything, and which he did. You know, he got the Warlegan.
By the time we see him,
he's already like a big cheese in Cornwall.
Right. I think he's definitely the most wealthy man in town.
He's the wealthiest man in maybe the whole of like Cornwall. Yeah, of the whole of Cornwall. So, you know, and I mean, he's just basically starts up like because, you know, Ross is starting to make waves in the community and starting up his own mining business, and George doesn't like it, and, you know, the old kind of like rivalry starts because, you know, could he still be into Elizabeth, and George secretly harbors an interest in Elizabeth too, because Elizabeth is like the ultimate for people because she's so highborn and noble bred.
She's got a family name, yeah. She's
family name, well bred. She's beautiful. You know, she's like
she is the actress who play both of that. Oh, sorry about that. Both of the main actresses in this show. Actually, there's a bunch of attractive people, but the main actresses in this show, Eleanor Tomlinson, who plays Demelza, and Haida Reid, who plays Elizabeth, they're both really beautiful women. So, I mean, you know, they go with Aidan Turner, basically.
Yes, I mean, some of the acting is great. I think it's really doing. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't like it, you know, who've read the books and are like, oh, the 2015 series, because that's when it started, it's not as great as the 1975 series, you know, and this one isn't so great, and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, there are people who don't like this type of show anyway, because it's like, it's too like,
Downton Abbey-ish.
Downton Abbey, but soap opera, like romance novel. Yeah. You know, it's too like that for
that's true. Yeah,
but I'm into it. So
yeah, I mean, it's a good show. I do, and it's a good story too.
It's a really good story.
I mean, I read the first two books and I really liked them. You know, and I think they adapted it well in the show. I mean, Dwight Ennis and Caroline Penvennon. Dwight and Caroline, Dr. Dwight Ennis. He was the doctor who came in, and in the books, he's just a doctor who's come into town, and you know, setting up shop because the old Dr. Choke, he's a bit useless. You know, he's always bleeding people, and you know, the old ways and stuff. And Dr. Ennis is a bit more frontier medicine and a little bit more on the ball with things, and you don't need to bleed people or put leeches on them or whatever, you know.
Yeah. You don't need to bleed people. Come on.
It's like, I've got to bleed her now because she's pregnant. Got to bleed her because she's got a headache. Got to bleed her because she's scraped her finger up. You know, it's that's Dr. Choke, you know. And Dr. Ennis.
He's a lot more with modern times.
He's a lot more with modern times, yeah. And in the books, he was just a doctor who turned up in the village and started making friends with Ross and everyone. But in the show, they've telescoped that and made them old army buddies.
Yeah, he was in the army.
He was in the army with him.
Yeah.
And of course, Elizabeth.
I can't remember why he's come to town, though. He was in the army because he's not from Cornwall.
No, he's not.
I
can't remember why he came to town.
He just ends up there.
He ends up there and starts treating the miners because the miners have health issues. I think he becomes like a surgeon for the miners at Wheel Plenty or Wheel Leisure or wherever, one of the mines that Poldark owns. But I mean, in the first 3 series, Aunt Agatha was the comic relief. I think the old she's the head of the family because she's the oldest Poldark, you know.
Yeah.
And she's like, someone got there for ye and all that kind of stuff, you know. And she's the Black Moon and
and she's just like all for Ross.
She's all for Ross, yes, because she knows Ross is headstrong and he's going to get his way and he's more progressive. He's a man of the people, whereas Francis wasn't. He was just taken care of by his father, and you know he drinks and he gambles. He was a spoiled rich boy who didn't care. But you know, as the series progresses, he learns from Ross that it's, you know, we should be with the people and we should help out people. And Warleggin, though, you know, despite coming from a humble background, he doesn't want to be a man of the people. He wants to be rich, and he wants to look down on everyone, and he wants to be high society. And he doesn't, and he's got a chip on his shoulder because
big chip on his shoulder. That's what I was gonna
he's got a big chip on his shoulder because he cannot get in society fully, because everybody who's actually come from money and who's got a bit of sense look at him like, oh yeah, he's just a blacksmith's boy, you know.
He doesn't have the name.
He doesn't have a name, yes.
Yeah. That's basically it. He doesn't have the history. He doesn't have the name. But you know what? It's funny because this happens a lot in Britain, doesn't it? The names often run out of money.
The names run out of money, so they have to marry money to keep it going, you know, to keep their name, you know. And it's usually someone who's got a self-made person who's like rich, you know, and usually it's the man who's got the name, and he, you know, used to be, I mean, in Downton Abbey, that's what they said that, you know, it's like, oh, I'm Lord Grantham.
Right.
But the money all ran out, so I had to marry this rich American woman who'd made her money on whatever, you know?
I mean, realistically, if we're being honest here, I mean, luckily for them, they were in love with each other. And I'm talking about modern times now. Prince William and Kate Middleton.
Kate Middleton, yeah.
I mean, basically, it's the same situation.
Same situation. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Her family's quite wealthy. I mean, that's not why, luckily for them, that's not why they hooked up. But basically, if they hadn't been into each other, she probably would have been. It's a good match.
She's got money. She looks beautiful. Yeah, it's perfect. Get with her. Get with her, William.
She would have been a good candidate, even if they hadn't been into each other, because her family is self-made and they've got a load of money. So that's the same kind of thing that's been happening.
Same sort of thing. Yes, I mean, you know, they were just basically holding on to a title.
They needed somebody with money in order to keep the family house up.
The family house up, yes, basically. I mean, you know, Downton Abbey and everything like that, you know. So that's what George is trying to do as well. You know, he's trying to, like, organize people to marry for money and, you know, keep a name, and he's trying to work his way up so he's got the money so he can marry Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like...
Then once he's got her,
that's it.
For a knighthood.
He's looking for a knighthood then, you know, and he's looking to be prime minister or whatever, because he's an MP. So he's climbing the rope, the slippery slope.
You mentioned Caroline before. I want to talk about Caroline.
Caroline had money.
Because she's another, member of the aristocracy, another absolutely amazingly gorgeous actress. I don't know, what is the actress's name that plays her? Caroline. Gabriella Wilde. Yeah, she is so pretty. She's probably my favorite actress on the show as for her fabulousness.
She was in the Centrinians movies, I think, as well.
And her costumes. Let's just talk about the costumes for a minute, actually. The costumes in this show are magnificent. I mean, they are so good. I just love Ross Poldark's. He's got a jacket and then the tricorn,
yeah.
Tricorn?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the pirate style hats.
It's a pirate style hat because they're in Cornwall after all. That's where the pirates come from.
Yeah. And he looks so good in that hat, guys. And he's got this beautiful jacket that he wears all the time, and then the like pirate style boots. I love how I do air quotation marks, like you can see me. the pirate type boots up over the pants, and like a flowing white shirt. And then the women all wear these beautiful gowns all the time. But Caroline has this one coat that I think is like it's like red. She wears, because she's got blonde hair and her hair's always up, and it's very like, she reminds me like Marie Antoinette, the way her hairstyle is a lot of the time. Yeah. And she's got this red coat that she wears and her red lips, and she just looks, I don't know, absolutely beautiful for lack of a more creative way of saying that. And then you have Demelza, who's got red hair and green eyes, and they put a lot of green on her, which makes her eyes look even more green. And it's absolutely beautiful costume design in this show. And the peasants and everything, of course, all of their stuff looks really... The thing is,
Gabriella Wilde was kind of born to play those kind of roles, like Elizabeth Penvennon and all that,
Why?
Because she actually comes from aristocratic family. She's from the Gough Calthorpe family, which is she's descended from it, first baronet and all that. Her father was the grandson of a baronet and all this kind of stuff, so she's descended from all that.
She's got a hyphenated name.
She's got a hyphenated name, yes. But I mean, it's very hyphenated, but she's just, she's gone down to Gabriella Wilde, she's a model and an actress.
And Eleanor Tomlinson, who plays Demelza, she comes from a family of actors, I think.
A family of actors, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think I've read that about her. Her parents, I think, are both actors, and she's maybe got a sibling who's an actor. I believe I've read that. So she's sort of like, acting has been bred into her too, and she is great. She's very cute. In the early days, like before he sort of tames her, she's quite wild, and she's very funny too. And as Dominic mentioned, Prudy and what was his name?
Judd,
yeah.
Yeah.
Phil
Davis and Beatty Edney. Phil Davis is a veteran. He was brilliant. Judd. They were servants. And Judd, Phil Davis does such a great Judd painter.
Yeah. There's so many one-liners from them, basically, and memorable, like, quotes that...
Didn't fit, didn't write, didn't proper. And, yeah, they are... the best one is the Reverend Osborne Ozzy Whitworth.
Oh,
You love him. You love him.
Oh, no, I forgot about him.
Yeah. So if you're watching the series, he's one of the best characters.
He's so greasy and horrible.
And you will love him. Because he's the best.
Yeah, he is. It is a good character, good acting, yeah.
I think he put on weight for the role.
Because you'll just despise him when you watch this. He plays a reverend, but... Yeah.
Reverend George, I think it's the Reverend Osborne Ozzy Whitworth.
Yeah.
Yes. And, he comes from money. His the Godolphins or something.
Yeah.
And so his, he's...
They're like one of the more wealthy families.
Because George Warlegan's going after them, trying to make a match, and which he does succeed in, and probably the worst match he's ever made. So he's no good at matchmaking, is George. He's not very good at anything, really, except making money and, lending it to people.
Jack Farthing. He will just make you... He's the actor who plays George Warlegan, by the way, and he's so good. He really makes you just hate George, but you're also just like, oh God, here we go. Every time he opens his mouth and just the facial expressions he does, and
yes, he's always been one-upped by Ross.
Yeah.
Even when he thinks he's getting one over on Ross, Ross is somehow one-upping him.
Yeah.
So it's just like, oh, I'll get that Poldark, you know. It's like, it's like very, he's like, Ross again.
Yes.
He does it again.
Yes, yeah, he's really, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good show. I mean, there's a lot of good people in it. I mean, Elise Chappell, who looks a lot like Audrey Hepburn, actually. You know, she's got that same kind of features.
Which one? Oh, right.
Morwenna,
yeah.
Morwenna.
Who was Elizabeth's cousin.
Yeah, she was Elizabeth's cousin, yeah, Chenoweth. So, yeah, and they've got, Lieutenant Hugh Armitage, who comes in. Yeah, he was another good one. Sam and Drake Khan, who were Demelza's brothers. Yeah, there's a lot of characters to keep up with, but it's all set in Cornwall around Truro on the coast. Nampara's like got a cove that they can, you know, you can see the sea from, and you know, it's such great scenery. They film all down there.
Yeah, the scenery is just breathtaking. It's really, really beautiful, the area that they have where they film this.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, of course, like, there's indoor sets, but all the location things. I mean, there's the famous scene of when Ross is out in the field mowing down cow parsley because, you know, his servants aren't doing it. So he's got his shirt off and he's doing all that, and it's all hot and sweaty work, and all the women are just like, yeah, that was their porn.
Even if you don't. Oh my God.
Yes, it was.
Oh my God. You just really never know what he's going to say when we're recording these podcasts, I swear. No, if you have not seen this show, you've surely seen that picture floating around the internet, because there were stills of that shot. It's so funny though, because we watched what did we watch? Some sort of interview or something like that, or a behind the scenes thing where they're like basically painting his abs on, you know.
They were painting the stuff on, yeah, and I mean, and you know, he's laughing and stuff, you know, the makeup artist is going and painting it all on.
They're like really making his abs like stand out with the makeup and everything, and he's just like laughing because Aiden Turner's he's very like,
he's good humored about it.
He's very energetic. If you ever see him in an interview, he's very like energetic and just like he seems happy all the time, and yeah, he seems to be a character.
The Verity and Andrew Blamey storyline, I mean, that happens in the books. Verity is
Verity
Ross's
is
cousin.
Ross's cousin, Francis's sister. Yeah, there's so many characters. I know we're just kind of throwing them all at you, but we're just like having a little discussion and
but that's another
remembering
that's another storyline that's going on in this show. She falls in love with a merchant captain who's out of the East India packet or something, you know, the East India Company, or he works for them. So he's a captain, and she falls in love with him, but it's like, I mean, it's a little bit of a spoiler here if you haven't seen it. There's a rumor going around that he killed his wife.
Oh.
Yeah, he killed his wife, but actually what it was is he was drunk, and they were having a fight, and he knocked her down, and she hit her head or something, and, you know, he didn't mean to kill her.
Yeah.
And I don't think he actually went to jail or anything for it, but everybody was just like, oh no, he's a blackguard and all that, and Verity cannot be with this guy. And so Francis and Charles get, you know, and Francis challenges him to a duel, because, you know, in those days the dueling was to satisfy your honor, you know.
Right.
My honor has
been
compromised, yeah.
Right, that was the only way to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was because he was older and he had kids, and she was young and she had never been married, and they were just like, oh God, no, this is
Well, she was
not
25, right, which was considered an old spinster age. If you weren't married by 17, you were done for.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think Demelza was supposed to have been like about 17 or 18, wasn't she?
In the book, she was younger.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was like 14 or something in the books. But I mean, it wasn't, you know, they say in the books
that happened,
you know,
back then, I mean.
Ross waited until she came of age before anything happened or something, you know, so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that happens.
That happens back then, and people were marrying that kind of stuff, and marrying young girls and young boys or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, what were we were just watching Henry VIII miniseries, an old one.
Of his wives was
basically as soon as they can bleed.
Was 15, yeah.
That's what they say.
As soon as they can bleed, they're good. Yeah.
Does she bleed yet? Is what they would.
Find out if she is bleeding.
Yeah. Does she bleed yet? Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Then she can get married. Yeah, you can have her then, or whatever. And it's just like, oh, God. You think about that now. I mean, you said it in now, and you just, ugh, you know, ugh.
Well, it's illegal now.
But back then, I mean, you have to think about it. Like, back then, people didn't live as long. So that age wasn't as young as it is now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, in relation to their lifespan, like, people might have lived only until their 40s back then. So it was just like...
that's true, yeah.
Yeah. We could say more, but I think we ought to stop.
Yes, you should go watch Poldark, though. The series 5 is the final one, so you've only got 5 series, and I think it's only like 8 or 10 episodes a series.
Yeah.
It's not long.
It's an hour-long show.
Hour-long show, but, you can binge it. You can find it on Netflix or something, or Hulu, or one of the streaming sites. What may have picked it up. I think
probably BritBox.
BritBox definitely will have it.
And it comes on PBS in America.
Oh,
so,
PBS, yeah, of course, PBS, yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes you can find episodes on YouTube even, but yeah, it does come on PBS. So look for that if you are into historical or period dramas, as we like to call them. Historical fiction, all of that kind of stuff. If you're into that, you will definitely love this show. And if you already watched the show, let us know what you think about it, or just chat with us about it, because we like talking about it. Obviously, I mean, we're just going on here. We're just like, oh yeah, remember this and remember that. Yeah. But yeah, it's gonna end sadly. I think because it's interesting, because the books, you said, go on. They follow the Poldark family.
They follow the Poldark family.
They kind of stop talking about
Ross and Demelza, and they go on with their kids, and that's.
So I think that's really interesting. I think that's something that they could maybe pick up later on, and people would possibly still be interested in it. I don't know. I think like a lot of people like me might watch it for Aidan Turner, but I'm sure they would still watch it even without him. Maybe. Anyway, I think that's it. Yeah, I need to stop talking.
I think that's it. I think we've driven Poldark into the mine.
Driven it way underground, yes. So, do all the things.
Do all the things.
And we'll talk to you later.
We'll talk to you later. Goodbye.
Bye.